How did Starmer respond when his policy decisions were being scrutinized? In this video, we look at Prime Minister Keir Starmer's high-stakes Liaison Committee session before the summer break. We'll also discuss the leadership principles behind creating effective policies and reveal how values shape decisions. Before we get into the details, if you love diving into political issues and enjoy hearing our principled take on them, then hit the like button, share this video, and subscribe to join the conversation. It will help our channel reach a wider audience.
Since you were last before us, Prime Minister, my committee published our interim findings on the Pathways to Work inquiry in May, where we expressed our considerable concerns about the imminent UC and PIP legislation, and particularly in terms of the changes in eligibility of these benefits, with the potential of pushing 250,000 disabled people into poverty. Now, I acknowledge the concessions the government made to the bill. But the fear and anxiety that this caused to disabled people currently in the system cannot be underestimated. I just wondered what you'd like to say to them now and what you will be doing differently in the future.
Well, it's very important that they feel secure and supported, and that is at the heart of what we are doing in the changes we're making to welfare and related areas. I want to see more opportunities and more support put in place. And some of that will come from the state, some of it can come from employers. I'm absolutely clear in my own mind there's more that employers could do and the state can help them to do to encourage those with disabilities to come into work and to retain if they are in work. And I've seen good examples of that myself, as no doubt you have, but not enough across the country. So we need to do more.
Thank you. Well, on that very point, you'll be aware that there is still projections that your government has put forward that estimate 50,000 newly disabled people in April next year will be pushed into poverty because of the reduction in the UC health element of the bill. Now, you mentioned about getting more disabled people into work. Charlie Mayfield, who, as you know, is doing the Keep Looking Working review, not to be published until later this autumn, Prime Minister, has said it will take several years before the labour market changes in order to allow more people to be employed, disabled people to be employed, but also to retain disabled people. So my question to you is, several years, 8 months, what are we going to do to mitigate against the potential pushing of another 50,000 people, disabled people, newly disabled people, and their families into poverty?
Well, I think the Mayfield report is coming in the autumn with the final recommendations, so we obviously need to look at that piece of work, and that is focused, as you know, on what employers can do. I don't accept that everything is going to take years. Some changes do take years, but not all changes take years, and we have to do work in the interim to give that support to those with disabilities.
What specifically had you in mind, given that we've had a disability employment gap for, well over 10 years?
Well, I think there's a lot of work can be done with employers to encourage them to take on and to retain. That doesn't need primary legislation. I've seen pilot examples of it across the country, which I'd like to see many more of, that have been very, very successful. So, yes, I accept that, if you want to pass legislation, it'll probably take some time. I don't accept that every change that is needed, some of them that I've seen for myself have been quite effective, don't need legislation at all, and I think we can get on with that as quickly as possible. The Mayfield recommendations will be on with us, obviously, later this autumn.
Can you give an example, Prime Minister, on that?
Yes, I'm aware of the Trailblazers examples, and again, these are pilots and tens of thousands, not the hundreds of thousands that will be affected next April. And I'd just like to point out that in my part of the world, there is one job for a disabled person for every 333 disabled people chasing them. It's slightly different in the south, where there's a more vibrant local economy. It just seems so punitive in that regard. But ultimately, Prime Minister, I just wanted to go back to my first point about doing things differently. This was poor legislation. It was designed to save money for the Treasury by cutting support to sick and disabled people. It was so far removed from Labour values of fairness and social justice, let alone compassion and common decency. I have to say I felt ashamed. So what are the values that will underpin the government in terms of the policy making going forward so that we avoid the harms, the potential harms and the real harms that people are going to face, disabled people, vulnerable people are going to face?
I think this is a really important Labour value. I think the fact that there are nearly 1 million young people out of work, not earning or learning, is a huge challenge for our country. None of us should be accepting of a system that operates like that. It is broken, it needs to be mended. All the evidence is that if you're on benefits and out of work at that young age, the likelihood of ever getting into good, well-paid, secure employment goes down, down, down for the rest of your life. 1 in 10 working age people out of work and 3 million locked out for health-related reasons. It is no wonder that almost everybody says the system is broken and it's got to be changed. And I'm glad that we've started the process of change. I'm not going to pretend that we got everything right in recent weeks, but we do need to reform the system, and we should take that on as a Labour argument, in my view.
Well, everybody agrees that reform needs to happen. It is a broken system. Reform does not, you mentioned right at the beginning in your introduction, reform does not mean cuts to household incomes of already struggling households. We must do better, Prime Minister. You mentioned about reducing poverty. This had the potential of actually increasing it.
It seems that we have, as Debbie Abrahams was saying, a long-term trend of unemployment increasing every month. It now stands at 4.7% and 1.67 million people out of work. And therefore it was perplexing to me, and I hope it might be perplexing to you, that when we did our inquiry on the 2nd of July into job centres, we found that there were 2,100 fewer work coaches than there had been the year before. Now, I accept that the DWP have had difficulty recruiting them, but given that I'm sure it must be your government stated objective to try and help people back into work wherever possible, and job coaches play a key part in that, it was surprising to find that not only was there fewer job coaches, their initial interview time had been cut from 50 to 30 minutes, with proposals to cut them even further. Now that means the moment the work coach gets into a room with the jobless person, they've got to establish who they are, get all their data, their criteria, their skills, their wishes, how they would get back into work, all in half an hour, which if it had been previously deemed that it was necessary to have 50 minutes, I don't see how quite that could be done in 30 minutes. And when we questioned DWP on this, they told us this was based on data from their own employees dating back to 2015 to 18. They had not done any surveys on the people trying to get back into work themselves. This really does seem peculiar. And we do know that the interwork rate declined from 9.7 in 2021 to 8.2 in 23-4. And I imagine it will decline again this year with the lack of these job coaches. So could you tell us how that might be reversed?
Yeah, I mean, let me go back to the beginning of your question, if I may. The employment rate is up 0.8% over the year. The unemployment rate is also up slightly.
So, Prime Minister, I don't think you quite answered what I asked. And you said, I think, that the job coaches were going to be given more time. In fact, not only are the initial interviews cut from 50 to 80 minutes, the follow-up interviews are also cut considerably as well. So, in other words, people seeking to get into work are finding it more and more difficult because they're getting less and less advice.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take away the point you're putting to me. I'm not across the details of how many minutes are allocated to the coaches in job centres, but the broad principle that you're putting to me, as it were, I agree with, which it needs to be more support for people to get into work, and we need to change the way job centres work altogether, in my view, and change the very nature of them, which is part of the work that we're doing. But I will.
Great leaders root their decisions in values like compassion, accountability, and opportunity. but values must lead to policies that deliver. For example, if raising business taxes triggers layoffs or hiring freezes, it can harm the very people it's meant to support. Both able-bodied and disabled workers are impacted by those decisions. Effective leadership demands consistency. Your actions must align with your goals. You cannot champion opportunities while creating barriers that contradict them. The principle is clear. Government policies should empower, not hinder. Legislation must create pathways for everyone, abled and disabled alike, to thrive, promoting independence and lifting people out of poverty. This requires leaders to think critically, anticipate consequences, and prioritize long-term solutions over short-term gains. What set great leaders apart? They create policies that turn values into action, building opportunities for individuals to maximize their potential and driving lasting impact. What values do you think make a leader's policies truly effective? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you have benefited in any way from this video, please subscribe, like, share, and be sure to leave us a comment.